All right, welcome to the channel. This is Moynagh Bass Fishes. I'm Jim Moynagh, and I'm going to slide my chair back a little farther. All right, this is the series called Falling Asleep to Jim Moynagh, reading from vintage fishing magazines. And the vintage fishing magazines always happen to be Bassmaster magazine because these are the most vintage magazines that we have. These were my dad's. So I guess I haven't picked out a topic, but here's the cover. This is May, June 1982. So this would have been about 1 year before I first became a member of BASS. And inside this issue, we got the proper prop, late spring bassin quiz, the lure collectors, rigging guide for worms. All right, late spring bassin quiz. Let's do it. Let's do it right now. That is what I am thinking will be cool. Huh. There's a couple X's here by some of the articles, some of the in the table of contents by that either I put them here or my dad put them here. He X'd when the worm turns, creek junctions for bass, and the 10 commandments for bass and success. So anyways, we're going for the late spring bass and quiz. Okay, and that'll be on page 33 by Rick Taylor. He was a big time author back in the day. Oh my God. Look at this guy. Yeah, that's one of our favorites right there. Hey, Jimmy, how are you doing? Now, what page did I say? What page did I say that was? 33. All right, let's get there. All right, there it is. There's our article right here. Okay. Late spring bass and quiz. All right, by Rick Taylor in bold print. Here it says, here's the second in a series of bass fishing seminars where you can test your know-how and knowledge against Bassmaster's panel of experts. All right. Oh, can you solve this bass and brain teaser? Match wits with the pros. That's the very top bold print up here. And Dave Whitlock is the artist. He's the artist of that picture. So, how many pages of this do we got? Hopefully not too many. Because I don't want... Well, you do need to fall asleep. So, I guess for those of you that are having trouble falling asleep, then maybe a few extra pages is in order. So we got about 4 pages with a bunch of ads thrown in there in the mix. So there you have it. Oh my gosh, there's a worm that a guy was telling me was a must-have. The Bloodline by Mr. Twister. There's a guy I know in Texas. I believe that's what he was showing me earlier this spring. That he hand poured them himself, and he was downright proud of those worms because they were a fish catching son of a gun. All right, let's get this reading off right now. In the opening installment of our bass fishing seminar in the April issue, we dealt with finding and catching bass on an unfamiliar lake in the early spring when the water temperature was 48 degrees. Now, we're going to tackle the same lake on a typical day in late spring with the water at a much warmer 68 degrees Fahrenheit. Okay, 68 degrees. This seminar session is set up just like the previous question-answer format. It's the same topo map, only this time showing the placement of Lake Megabass emerging weed growth. Study the map in Figure 1 carefully, keeping in mind the new set of conditions, weather, temperature, etc., and answer the questions. Then compare your answers with Bassmaster Magazine's panel of experts on the following pages. Again, the panel consists of Bill Ward, who I believe was maybe a son of Virgil Ward from the TV show Championship Fishing, a show that I watched many times as a youngster. Harold Allen and Rick Taylor. So those are our three experts: Bill Ward, Harold Allen, who is from he's right around that Toledo Bend area. I don't know if he's on the Texas side or the Louisiana side, but Harold Allen, legendary, the El Camino bass towing with the El Camino. I don't know if he still does, but he when I first started fishing nationally, his tow rig was a El Camino. These three Bassmasters represent, respectively, a cross-section of mid-America, the South and the North, and offer a wide variety of bass fishing viewpoints. Bill Ward of Amsterdam, Missouri, for example, usually doesn't study maps before going fishing. Using 40 years of fishing experience, he often decides on an area to fish just by looking at it. Yet this unscientific approach has taken Ward to the Bassmaster Classic year after year. Harold Allen, besides also being in the upper echelon of bass and pros, guided professionally on Toledo Bend for many years. He's on the water more days than not and is rapidly becoming known as one of the more knowledgeable bass masters in the country. Allen now makes Batesville, Mississippi his home. I don't know if that's the case anymore. He may be back in somewhere around Toledo Bend. Anyways, but I don't know. Rick Taylor of Iowa City, Iowa. Really? I didn't know he was from there. Iowa City, Iowa. Home of the Iowa Hawkeyes. Doesn't say that. I added that. That's my editorial input. Has been studying, fishing for, and writing about bass full-time for the past 11 years. He offers a more scientific perspective. He also designed the quiz, so we had to let him play. Taylor, a top bass club competitor in the Iowa BASS Federation, has written numerous articles and books on bass fishing. Again, don't fret too much if your answers vary from the panel's decisions. There can be a whole passel of patterns to catching bass on any lake, on any day, especially at this season of the year. All right, so let's kind of give a synopsis of the conditions, okay? So water temperature, 68 degrees, which we did mention already, and steady, it says. Weather summary. The previous 3 days were warm and sunny. Temperature. This would be the air temperature, 73 degrees. Sky, overcast. Wind, easterly at 5 miles per hour. Barometer, 29.82 and falling. Water level, up 1 inch in the last 2 weeks. Water clarity, you can see a lure 18 inches down. Moon phase, the day after a new moon. Okay, that is the summary of the conditions. Now, personally, 68 degree water temperature, I mean, we are all over spawning fish right now. So that is going to be everything's going to center around the spawn. So whether you're targeting fish that are about to spawn or that have just spawned or that actually are on beds, that's your choice. But that's what we're all about here. Okay, the questions. There are 7 questions, all right? So first, I guess we should probably show you it's called Lake Megabass. It's a lowland impoundment, semi-rocky, late spring season. So this would remind me of, yeah, okay, well, this is what they show. I see a little bit of Sam Rayburn in there. I see a little bit of Lake Eufaula, Oklahoma in there. A little bit of Lake Eufaula, Alabama in there. So I see possibly like a Lake Shelbyville, maybe. In Illinois, I see nothing. I don't see anything in Minnesota in there. All right, so that is what we're looking at. Built in 1971, acres, 500. So it's a little tiny son of a gun. All right. Okay, to the questions. Study the map illustrating in figure 1, or illustrated in figure 1. If you could fish only one spot today, where would it be? Mark it on the map and explain your reasons. All right. Okay, we have overcast skies and 18 inches water clarity. You probably are not going to be able to sight fish. So you can blind fish for bedding bass. That is one option. And I would, for sure, I'm fishing 5 foot or less. Probably fishing 3 foot. Actually, with 18-inch water cleared, I'm probably fishing 3 foot or less. The water's been steady, maybe up an inch, it said in recent weeks. So the fish are going to be on beds in like 10 inches of water down to about 3 feet. Okay, so if you want to target bedding bass, that's what you got to do. But you're gonna have to blind fish for them because we got overcast skies and minimum water clarity. So the one spot that I would want to fish, it says semi-rocky. You know, if I had to pick one of these coves, so I'm gonna be fishing a cove. So probably this one, right there. Okay, the reason why is because it's protected. It's been protected from any north winds, but we haven't had a front lately. So you really, any cove is game. But these ones that are always on the north side of the lakes usually are better. And I particularly like this one because with 68 degrees, these fish for sure will be spawning in this one. But I think you get more deep water down here, and I think you just might run into bigger fish out of this cove. Could be wrong. That one could be really good. And then you never know. That one might be pretty darn good. The other thing you have to factor is runoff. If you have runoff, a lot of runoff coming in, like say this one, looks like this river channel comes right in there. So that could, if you do get some rain, that could really muddy it up in there, and it's not as attractive to a spawning bass. So actually, this one, it's flatter. The steeper sided ones generally, I do like that, but this one right here may not be bad. And then I guess, what does this mean? Okay, there's like little in this legend here. It says weeds and flooded timber. So the weeds, I don't see where there's any weeds marked on the map. But the flooded timber, so this might be marking flooded timber. Flooded timber. So anyways, they love to spawn next to stumps. Make their beds next to stumps. So that's another reason why you might want to pick this one over that one. But how much flow comes in here? That's what you want to know. How much flow? Is that is this a spring-fed creek that comes in here and cools us down? So you just don't know. There's a lot of options there. I mean, there's some variables we just don't know. But anyhow, let's go back to it. So I'll go with this one. I mean, assuming that there's not a whole lot of flow coming in there, I'll go with this one. All right. Next question. What spot would be your second choice? Mark it and explain. All right. I'll say, geez. It just depends how much runoff comes into these. So, I mean, I haven't said anything about this one. There's like no cover in there. It's probably just rock. This one, if there's any cover in here, it's kind of flat, but I don't know. It's not one to be overlooked. Number one's right there, though. I wish that the legend says there's weeds, but I don't see the symbol for weeds anywhere on the map. So that's just too darn bad, I guess. Question 3. What would be your first choice in lures? Type, color, size. Describe your technique in using it. All right, being that this is 1982, there was no such thing as a Senko. Okay. There might have been lizards and Texas rigs, worms and stuff. So anyhow, using today's tackle, I would fish. It's overcast, so I would probably fish in this pocket right here. I'd be looking for trying to catch fish off their beds, throwing a weightless worm or a prop bait top water, fish really slow. Okay, that would be my number one pattern. The next pattern would be fishing like either that point or that point. Probably that one there. Just fishing points that are right near there. There's no docks. Doesn't say anything about docks in there. All right. And if you get a super slowly reeled chatterbait can be kind of a good bait too. All right, question 4. What would be your second choice in lures? Okay, no, it also says to describe your technique in using it. Okay, so if you're throwing a Senko, yeah, you just throw it out and let it fall really slow till it hits the bottom. And given the watercolor, I'd probably pick like Bama bug, or I'd pick. Considering the overcast and the watercolor, Bama bug, or a June bug, or maybe a chartreuse pepper. One of those three is kind of what I'd go with. And also, I would then on the top water bait fish really so you just throw a pop out there, sputter it, then let it sit, sputter it, let it sit. I'd probably go with a white belly with some orange on it. That's kind of what I'm thinking. So, anyways, so what's your first choice? What's your second choice? All right. 5, your work schedule, family needs, etc. will allow you to fish only one 4-hour stretch today. What period would you select and why? Okay. At this time of year, I would pick the last 4 hours, and this goes just about any just about any time of the year. I do this. I'd pick the last 4 hours of the day, especially when you're talking spring or when you get later in the fall. In the morning, the water's cooler in the shallows, and that's indeed when we got fish spawning. They're going to be up shallow. They're going to be cooler, and they're just not quite as energized. So, but it is going to be overcast, so you may not get that sun, and you may not get the sun energy anyways. But I would still go with the last 4 hours, because I guess typically that's always been my favorite time of the year, or of the day, most times of the year actually too. And that's just because the fish just seem more active at that. The later it gets in the day, the more active they get so many times to me. All right. 6. So we got 2 more questions. What kind of bass and success would you expect to encounter under these conditions? Check one column for both lunker and keeper fishing potential. All right, so basically they give you a little chart there, and you check for So either you pick great, good, fair, or poor. Um, I'm just saying great, great. Great for lunkers, great for keepers. Although, no, I'm going to change that. I'll say great for keepers and fair for lunkers. Because when you're blind fishing, bedding fish, I mean, you might be catching a ton of males, and if it's not right, you're not going to catch many females. I would expect there to be a few females on bed, but the fact that we're already 68 degrees water temperature, um, I would have to believe that a lot of females have already come and gone. There's still some yet to come along. Uh, so that's why I would say fair to good on the lunkers and keepers great. All right, so now last question, number 7. How important do you feel the following variables are to this day's fishing? Assign a value 0 to 4 to each and briefly explain. Okay, 0 would be not a factor, 1 very little factor, 2 somewhat factor, 3 strong factor, 4 critical factor. All right, so here's the conditions right here. Water temperature and present trend. Yeah, that's a strong factor. Sky conditions. That's a strong factor. Yeah, strong factor. Wind direction and speed, they're all strong factors. Barometric pressure and present trend. Moon phase. All right. Moon. I am not a moon phase guy at all. The only thing I'll buy into the moon is maybe some of the fish feed more under a brightly lit moon, but I don't think they time their spawning according to what you always hear is the full moon is the key. That is so not the key. What's the key is your stable water levels, and most importantly is just the water temperature. Is your main lake water temperature warming up along with some of the backwater water temperatures? That's the key. So if you got water temperatures climbing into the 60s, there's going to be spawning fish somewhere. And when that main lake hits a 60, it's going to be totally on. Because if your main lake's 60, that means your shallow, remote parts of the lake, up the coves, in the canals, in the shallow connected bays, I mean, you're going to be like upper 60s in there, and there's going to be there's going to be fish flooding the bedding areas. So the moon phase, and I know I'm in the minority on that sort of thing, on that frame of thought, but it's something I watch every year, and maybe those Florida strain fish have a little more, have a closer tie to the moon phase. But even then, I've been in Florida enough times. I've been, when the water temperature is not right and it's a full moon, there ain't gonna be nothing spawning. Very little. I've seen that so many times. So forget the moon phase. No, I go 0, not a factor. All right, answers. Here we go. Question 1 was, what was that particular spot on the map your first choice? Bill Ward, I think some bass will be on a post-spawn pattern moving out toward deeper water, and as they do, they tend to school up on points. This one, Ward 1, Figure 2, is inside a good spawning cove and points toward a nearby outside bend of a channel. Okay, let's find that Figure 2. All right, Ward 1. Ward 1 is right there. Okay, that's his number 1 spot for post-spawn fish. I don't know why he thinks it's near a channel. It looks like that channel's like right down almost the center of the bank or the cove, but whatever. All right, that's Bill Ward's. Harold Allen. I like the entire upper end. Allen 1, figure 2. So Allen is up in here, it looks like. The water has warmed considerably and the fish should be in the shallow spawning or trying to. This area has plenty of flats with good accessibility to deeper water in case of a front. The area affords plenty of protection for Mr. Bass with heavy concentration of weeds as well as timber. Okay, if those dots are supposed to be weeds, that's a huge factor. You don't want to be in any of these coves that don't have, you want to be in one of these coves with the grass. Okay, if they're calling this grass, you want to be in any one of these coves that has that. That's what I'm saying right now. But it does. But in the key, the grass doesn't look like that. So I don't know. Anyways, Rick Taylor. The whole upper section looks good. Taylor 1, figure 2. So Taylor he's right there with that Harold Allen. Okay. Because of its weed, timber, channels, and flats, the two major patterns now should be spawning and heavy feeding and in this area. Especially with its flat and weeds offers it all. I'd work both the channel banks from the intersection in and the flats in 2 to 3 feet of water. Okay. What was your number 2 spot? Bill Ward, I like this point. Ward 2 for the same reason as the other. As bass move toward deeper water after spawning, they may congregate on this point, which has the added attraction of being near a channel intersection. So, where's Ward 2? Ward 2 is right there. That point right there. Okay. Now, Harold Allen. Again, looking for spawning conditions, this area, Allen 2, offers a very large area for fish to spread out during the spawning urge. Present here is the very important weed growth for cover as well as protection. So, Allen's 2 is right there. Well, the map's not showing the weeds. I don't know. I don't get it. I don't get unless it's just the shaded part. Maybe the shaded 5 foot and less part means it's weeds. I don't know. Whatever. That part was not clear. Okay. And then Rick Taylor. The Western Cove offers everything that the upper end does. Weeds, timber, a channel, and flats, with the exception of being smaller. Also, I think many big bass like to pick spawning areas very close to their deep water winter homes rather than run all the way up to the headwaters. So Taylor 2 is this area back in here. Okay. Next question 3. What lure would you start out with today and how would you work it? Bill Ward. The 3/8 ounce Bassmaster live rubber jig and perk tail plastic in brown and orange. I'd use it with a slow pumping motion, almost like with a plastic worm. If this doesn't work, I'd use more of a swimming motion, working the jig slowly about 1 foot off the bottom. I fish it from about 2 to 10 feet until establishing a depth at which the bass were holding. So basically, he's fishing a Bassmaster live rubber jig, and it says perk tail, but perk tail, and then in parentheses it says plastic. I don't know what a perk tail is. Brown and orange. Okay, so he's a jig guy. Harold Allen. I'd start with a 6-inch plastic worm in grape black, or green. I'd work the edges of the weeds, especially small points and pockets, and into isolated pockets in the weeds. I feel equally confident doing this with a 1/4 to 3/8 ounce white spinnerbait with silver blades, and I'd occasionally throw a buzzbait at random across the weeds, trying to pattern where and how the most hits are triggered. Rick Taylor, I'd start with a topwater like a devil's horse or buzzbait. The reasons for me: 1, for me, there's nothing more fun than catching bass on top. 2, I'm expecting the bass to be scattered and active today, and this is a good way to cover a lot of ground quickly. On located bass, however, like boils or missed strikes, I'd quickly throw a plastic worm, 6-inch purple with red curly tail, because I feel plastic worms are the most effective lures right now. Question 4. What would be your second choice in lures? Bill Ward, a super floater worm, 6-inch and black with chartreuse tail. Floating worm. I'd use a slip sinker rig using a slow pumping motion, lifting it off the bottom. Okay, it's not a floating worm. And letting it fall back slowly, and each time taking the slack up as I moved it toward the boat. I'd fish it from 2 to 10 feet until establishing the depth at which the fish were using or active. So he's basically using a worm and fishing it the same way he was using the jig. Harold Allen, a slow-moving topwater, rogue, redfin, chugger, in silver or gold with black back. I'd work along edges of the weed lines with short, slow switching actions. Rick Taylor, my backup bait would be a multicolored tandem spinnerbait in 1/4 to 3/8 ounce size. If I could keep it from falling in the weeds, I'd work it over the tops and let it fall into openings, then let it drop on the outside edges. One thing these guys haven't said, so we got 18 inches of water clarity. If you have a real like heavy weeded area, like typically I see this in Florida. I know we're not talking about Florida in this article, but like if you get on Lake Okeechobee on a huge weed flat, I remember Joel Richardson winning a tournament many years ago on Lake Okeechobee, and there's a huge eelgrass flat by Fish Eating Bay where a bunch of bass were spawning in the eelgrass, but the eelgrass was all coming up to the surface, except there'd be like big round openings in the eelgrass, and those were the beds. So like Joel would pitch his worm into these beds or into these clearings in the these open round clearings in the eelgrass, and he couldn't see the bottom. He would just imagine there's a bass there spawning, so he pitched it in there and just inch it through there, and won the tournament doing that. So I haven't really seen the guys talk about that too much, but they are talking about spawning fish and worms, and some of these guys are talking about worms, so I guess maybe that's just one little nuance to add there. All right. Okay, we read that. Now we're on to question 5. What 4-hour stretch did you select and why? Okay. Bill Ward, the 7 a.m. to 11 a.m. period. Exact opposite of me. Exact. I have made most of my good catches, including big fish, in the morning. But he's fishing. Remember now, he was saying he's keying on post-spawn fish. I don't care. I still like the afternoon, especially. Let's say you're in a lake with boat docks. A lot of those post-spawn females will get under those boat docks, and as the day goes on, they'll like rise up right under the floats in there, and they get right towards the end of the day. They can be hot fish. I mean, hot fish, and they're big females that have just spawned. So I know we don't have docks in this diagram. That's not what we're talking about. So Bill Ward, 7 a.m. to 11 a.m. The way he's fishing, that's his deal. Harold Allen, I favor the 8 a.m. to noon time slot. The fish are shallow 24 hours a day now, so they will not be moving in and out of the shallows. They should be ready as soon as you get there, so go when you can. Given the weather conditions they offered here, I would agree that there's probably going to be a morning bite, but it's probably going to be an all-day bite. This kind of a day, you can go any 4 hours because it says it's you got a steady water temperature, you got overcast skies, you have lighter winds. It's probably going to be a day where the bite's just good all day. There's not like a peak bite and then off bites. That's kind of what I'm thinking. But if that sun ever came out, last 4 hours of the day, in my mind. Rick Taylor, my time slot would be 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. If this day were sunny, I'd have picked the dawn period. But being overcast, the bass should be shallow and active all day, and these particular hours have been good to me. I guess I'm outnumbered 3-1. I'm telling you. The last 4 hours, if it's sunny, for sure. And then on this kind of a day, if I've always said, if you have a night where the air temperature stays warm and the surface temperature of the water doesn't drop very much or very little, then during the spawn, yes, that first 4 hours will be just as good as any part of the lake, if not better. So maybe I didn't weigh into the conditions as much as I should have. But yes, I can see what I'm outnumbered 3-1 by these three experts. So, but I only agree with them if you have an evening where the water temperature does not drop much, very little. Then I could see where the first daylight you get out there, that could be as good as any. Okay, number 6. What kind of bassin would you expect to find today under these conditions? Bill Ward said, fair for the lunkers, good for the keepers. Harold Allen, great for the lunkers and great for the keepers. And Rick Taylor, good for lunkers, great for keepers. So I'm kind of in line with them on that one. Next question. And this would be the last one, right? How important do you feel the following variables are to this day's bass fishing and why? Water temperature. Bill Ward, very little factor. Once the water temperature gets into this range, 68 degrees, it's not much of a factor. Water temperature being 68 degrees. Well, what if it was 58 degrees? It would be or what if it was 78 degrees? The water temperature dictates what's going on. So it's always a factor. To me. Unless if I misunderstand what they're trying to get at with this. Harold Allen, a critical factor. So he's completely on the other end of the spectrum. The spawning attempt has started. A drop of a few degrees will turn the fish off. Then after they have adjusted to the change, some activity will occur. Yes, that is true. But we're saying we have 68 degrees temperature and it's steady. So I don't know. It's water temperature. Water temperature dictates where the stage these fish are in the spawn. Rick Taylor, a strong factor. A temperature in the high 60s and holding is ideal now. Triggering strong feeding and spawning. A strong cold front can ruin things for a while, but not for as long as compared to as in the early spring. Yeah, I agree. If you suddenly have a big cold front come through, but we're not. We don't have a big cold front on this day. But he's right, though. The cold front, when the fish have moved up and you get a cold front, that knocks them out. The females will completely quit spawning, pretty much. There'll still be males guarding beds. Some of the males may abandon their beds, especially if they just got in, if they just came in, and then a front comes through. That could knock all the males off the beds. All right, sky conditions. Bill Ward, somewhat of a factor. I prefer an overcast day because I believe the fish tend to stay shallower and not be as spooky as on a sunny day. I mean, they'll have. I've noticed on an overcast day with spawning fish, a fish will swim farther off his bed to grab a slow sinking Senko as compared to a sunny day. On when the sun's bright overhead, that fish doesn't want to move much to go get a bait, generally speaking. But in overcast, guys, he'll swim way off the bed to grab something. Or let's say he's got a deeper bed, like in a clear lake. Let's say you got a bed that's 7 feet down. Well, you could throw a slow sinking worm, and it may only sink 3 feet, and the fish is under overcast skies is more willing to swim up and grab it. Whereas in sunny conditions, the fish may only bite it once it gets all the way to the bottom, or right in front of his face. Harold Allen. Okay, back to sky conditions, or what we're, Harold Allen, a strong factor. Fish definitely feed better and longer during an overcast day. After several days of overcast, a sudden bright bluebird day will make the fish very spooky. Woo-hoo-hoo-hoo. Agreed. I agree. Rick Taylor, a critical factor. This cloud cover today is instrumental in where and how to fish. While a bright sky usually bunches the bass into key areas, pulls them tight into cover or into deeper water, an overcast sky makes them feel more secure and tends to scatter them. Okay, next, wind direction and speed. Bill Ward, very little factor. I don't believe 5 miles per hour is very much of a factor. I agree. I absolutely agree with that. 5 degrees is not much of a factor. If it was blowing 20 miles per hour, that would be a factor. Harold Allen, a strong factor. During spring fishing trips, wind is always a factor. How long you can stay in a protective area, how well you present your lure, how well you can feel your lure, etc. Rick Taylor, somewhat of a factor. If the wind were stronger today, it would probably affect the location of many bass, but today it's perfect. Blowing just enough at 5 miles per hour to ripple the water. So, next, barometric pressure. See, the barometric pressure kind of goes hand in hand with the overcast conditions, because a lot of times when you have a falling barometer, that's because you have clouds and kind of a front coming in. A falling barometer means that there is a front coming. So, and that tends to get the fish a little more aggressive. It tends to make them bite. Bill Ward, very little factor. The only barometer I don't like for fishing is a high pressure situation. Okay. Harold Allen, somewhat of a factor. If fish were ever going to feel the effects of a pressure change, it would be when they are in the shallows, like now. Rick Taylor, very little factor. I've charted the barometer for 4 years now and can find no association between it and fish behavior. Moon phase, Bill Ward, somewhat of a factor. I think bass fishing is somewhat better near a new moon than a full moon. Okay, this is, by the way, we're on the last page. Harold Allen, somewhat of a factor. In this period, late spring, the water is warm enough for some feeding at night, but I don't rely on this factor much. I'm like Harold. I don't pay attention to the moon. I just don't. I don't think it has. Well, I do pay attention. Every time during the spawning season, I pay attention to the moon just to prove to myself that it has nothing to do with the timing of the spawn. Rick Taylor, somewhat of a factor. I think the moon cycle can have some effect on some bass's spawning cycle, especially in regions of long, stable weather. I also think the light of a full moon encourages bass to feed more at night. I wish I knew more about it. Agreed. Tips and comments, Harold Allen. During this time of year, I like to sometimes back off the banks and shallows and work to drops where the flats break into deep water. Also, I like to find small isolated hilltops or mounds with the proper depth. I like to work these areas with plastic worms, lizards, jigs, and deep diving crankbaits. I also would try this lure selection on points. Rick Taylor. While the shallow weedy flat should provide the most action now, if the size of the bass taken begins to diminish, I assume the larger fish may be moving out toward deeper water. So I'll often work a channel bank as deep as 15 feet or go point hopping at the mouths of good spawning coves. But for the most part, I think the most bass will relate to the weeds in the lakes, like our illustration, as long as the water temperatures stay favorable. Yeah, I don't think you want to venture away from the weeds in this lake. I agree. Closing comment. Hey, we didn't get any tips and comments from Bill Ward. Well, he's trying to be elusive. Closing comment. Well, how'd you do on this one? Pretty good? I'll wager. Most Bassmasters are up on their spring bass and know-how and have little trouble catching fish this time of year. The next Bassmaster magazine seminar in the July-August issue, however, may be a little tougher. We'll be faced with post-cold front conditions in the middle of summer. Be ready! It's a Bassin problem our panel of experts should find intriguing and their answers interesting. Cold fronts seemingly always give the bass instant lockjaw and leave many bassers puzzled for a solution. All right, well, that's the end of it. There's the back cover. Was that a Shakespeare ad? Okay, never had one of them. I don't know what else. That's pretty much it. Got to show you a picture of Al Linder, I guess. There's Al with promoting Trilene. All right, well, thanks for watching. Hope you are long asleep by now. That's the goal. I'm not here to excite you. I'm not here to keep you awake. I'm here to make you fall asleep. Good night.